We're talking today about organization charts. Where I'm going to explain to you a bit of my experience about certain organizations wanting to have organization charts on their SharePoint. I'm going to talk to you about specifically Quizcom org chart app features. That's what we're here for. I'm going to show you how to install the app so that after this webinar you can go to your site and install the app. And I'm going to mostly focus, we're going to spend most of the time on how to use the app. So some stories. Basically, I'm not going to bore you too much. If you're on this webinar, you probably saw the title of the webinar. You saw an org chart and you said, "Ooh, I need an org chart in my organization. I better go and see this." So you probably already know the usefulness. But I've been in a lot of situations where the clients, either government clients or educational clients, or even social and blue chip clients, where they told me, "Look, we want to display an org chart. We don't want to rely just on the people search function that SharePoint shows." And I had several clients asking me to come up with an org chart, and there isn't really a feature in SharePoint that allows you to do that. You do get the user profile import that imports into SharePoint everything from Active Directory or based on the filter, and it does even import the relevant information. It knows who the manager is for each person, and it's sort of, you could say that the user profile service does show an org chart as long as it shows one person at a time and it shows who's the manager and who's under that person. But it doesn't show it in a chart way. It's what we call person cards. You see one person and you see who's above them and you can click on the person above them, but it doesn't show the hierarchy in the organization. Actually, the organization I'm working on for right now, I'm consulting for right now, has that exact same need where they keep updating their org chart in a PDF every day. Now, in addition to that, different sections in the organization may want to display different org charts because they have not necessarily they do not necessarily have control over the settings in Active Directory to say who's manager, and the process to get the IT people to update that is too much, and they want to update it in their own database and not be reliant on the ICT department to update the correct who's the manager, who's the reports to. So these are the kind of requirements that I see, and of course the number one requirement, make it look good. And this is where Quizcom org chart app comes in. The app allows us to configure several data sources. Excel file that lives in SharePoint, and this is a very common request that I get from clients where they tell us, "Oh, our department manages our org chart in an Excel file. Can you turn that into something pretty that we can show on a web page?" Using Quizcom org chart, definitely I can. Graph API basically allows you to connect to external Excel data sources, and the number one that I'm going to demo today is Azure AD. So if you're on Office 365, all your users and your user management is actually in Azure, Windows Azure, and where they have the Active Directory Admin Center, and using Graph API we can connect to it and display exactly what's configured in Active Directory. Of course, that also depends on ICT, on whoever is allowed to update the user profiles in Azure, and there's all kind of development and customizations that can be done around that. But today we're going to see the out-of-box behavior. What happens if IT are responsible for deciding in Active Directory who's manager, and we're going to show that Quizcom org chart app can connect to that and display it. Finally, and that's the second demo I'm going to do today, is information in a SharePoint list. So I just created a SharePoint list. You'll see it in a second. Populated it, specified some values, and we'll see how we can make that. And that's my preference above an Excel file. So I would only use Excel file over SharePoint list if we are talking about a huge amount of rows of data. Otherwise, I prefer to have my information in SharePoint list, which allows my end users much more ease in managing the information. Now, persistent cache, talking about large amount of data, this is a great feature in the org chart. If the information is large and it comes from a data source that may not be necessarily so fast to react, either SharePoint list or Graph API, even Excel, if it takes a long time, you'd be happy to know that Quizcom org chart app comes with a persistent cache that you can configure the expiry of, meaning that it doesn't show the user necessarily the current information, but it shows cached information that lives, let's say, 9 hours. So it refreshes once a day, and the first time the user comes into the office per day and accesses the org chart, it will take a bit longer, but the following time it will be very quick because it will show the cached data. So that's a great feature. And there's a lot of customizations and templates and filters and additions that we can do. I will demo some of them today. Okay, without further ado, let's go into some demos and information. I will actually start this by showing you, and let me make sure I'm exiting the. Yeah. So this is the Quizcom website. You can get to it by typing quizcom.com to your favorite browser, and then Office 365, and you can view all Office 365 apps if you want to see it in a list, or you can see some of them that are highlighted over here, and you can find the org chart app in brackets SPFX. You can find it over here. The org chart app has, well, all Quizcom apps have a download and try tab, and in download and try there are some instructions. How do you need to what do you need to do to install it? Now notice that when I went to Office 365, it actually had some apps just written app, and some of them are saying SPFX. So you can tell the difference between two different types of apps. What's the difference? Mostly in how you install it. SPFX app require you to download the zip file, which will have a package once you unzip it, and then you need to go to your site app catalog. Now, if you're not familiar with it, Office 365 sites you'll need to configure a site that is the app catalog for all the sites in your organization, and then you just drag and drop the app. The file from the downloaded zip file, you drag and drop that into the apps for SharePoint container. Say that you trust it, that you want it to deploy, and once it's deployed, you can add it to a page. Let's quickly see how you can add it to a page. I'll create a new page in my website. Notice I'm using the new interface, what's called the modern interface for Office 365, not the new one, so not the old one. So I'm creating a site page, not a wiki page or anything else. So this is if you haven't seen that before, this is only available in SharePoint Online, and this is how I author a page here. So org chart demo, and that's it. That's my page. Now, if I want to add a component to the page, I'm saying I want to add a new web part, and I flick through the list of web parts that are installed on my site or my organization until I find the org chart. When I add an org chart, it says, oh, you need to configure me. I don't know what you want me to display, so you need to configure me. At which point you say, I want to edit web part, and you get the first section. Section is 3 simple questions. What's the data source type? Where do you want the information from? So I have the option, as we talked about before, Excel, Graph API, or SharePoint list. And if it's Excel, it's asking me for URL. If it's a Graph API, it's asking me for Graph path, which you need to know. And this is where you can basically connect it to anything that your Microsoft Graph can connect to and exposes as a database, or a SharePoint list where you tell it, okay, this is where my site is, and this is the list that I have in my site that I want to display the contents of in an org chart manner. I'll quickly select a list here. You see that when I select, it automatically populates and shows me the org chart based on that list, based on some default settings. If you want to see those default settings, we'll see them next. But you can see here I can configure the cache. So you can say no cache or never expires. Never expires means it refreshes once and you need to manually refresh the cache. No cache means that every time it loads, it will take a bit longer. And in between, you can choose any amount of hours that you want. And when I click next, you see I have some options to customize what's shown and what's shown on the graph, on the chart. Okay, so that was how do we install. Let's talk about usage. So in usage, so you actually just saw me adding the web part to the SPFX page. Now I wanted to show you some configuration options. So we already talked about data source types, and we already talked about how to configure a site and a list. You can filter the list down to a certain view. So if you don't want to see the entire contents of the list. And by the way, when we're talking about the list, let's have a look at that list. Well, what list is this? This is a regular out-of-the-box contacts list. So I basically went and created a new list of type contacts, and then created some items. You see last name, first name, full name, email address, and so on. The only two things that are added that are not in the normal contacts, well, three things I added that are not in the normal contacts list, are a manager field that is a lookup field and is looking up back into the list. So you can see here, I can choose the people that are in the list as managers. And same thing for reports too. Reports too, looking back into the list and allowing me to specify a separate manager and reports too. I'll explain that in a bit. And also I added a picture column that allows me to specify a link to a picture. And for some users, I uploaded pictures, and so that we can see the picture. You can see here the picture. But if I choose to edit, it just asks me for the link. Okay, and the link can be in SharePoint, out of SharePoint. So it's a regular SharePoint list. If I didn't want to show all the items in the list, all the people that were entered into the list, I could create in the list another view called filtered view, or only HR, or something like that, and create and connect this web part to that specific view instead of the all contacts view, and that's what it's connected to now. I can configure a number of items that it will be limiting to. I can add a custom CSS if I want to play around with the look and feel of the chart. By the way, let's see that chart a bit bigger. Here we go. And I can zoom in and out in this chart and scroll it around. I can also choose, okay, instead of first name, so you see right now it's showing the first name, I want the name to display the full name. The chart will refresh, and now you can see the full name. Now you see it automatically selected manager to know who's the manager, so it knows manager is the most likely property to be in the manager. If you don't have a field called manager, you'll probably have to set it up yourself. The reports too allows me to set a secondary, and this is very important and very beautiful thing to do, a secondary manager. So it could be that someone has one manager who actually manages the day-to-day, but another person, they're actually, oh, notice I didn't fill in the full name for that user, so I better go back. But you can see that that person, while being managed by Shai, is actually reporting to Penny, and you can tell the difference between manager and reports too based on the color. Now let's talk about advanced configuration here. I think that's our next slide. Yes. So choosing column association is what we've just done. Showing pictures, so you can see here there was a picture option, and originally when I created the contacts list, I didn't have a picture column to connect it to. Once I told it, yeah, I do have a picture column, and suddenly people's pictures appear in the org chart. So that's very cool. Changing chart types, you're not limited to just one chart type. You can see here that let me publish this page. The interface will become a bit easier to navigate. So if I publish this page, this is how it looks like to the end user. The end user doesn't have all the controls that I saw above it. Those are configuration controls that are only shown when you're editing the page and editing the web part. So if I go back into editing the page, and I want my users to see a different type of chart. The chart that I'm showing right now is called org chart by org chart.js, and you can see here several options on how to display the same information in different ways. So I can choose to display it as a list, which just shows me the SharePoint list as a list. I can choose to display it as an org chart by a different provider, and you can see the style of the chart now looks completely different, and maybe this is how you prefer it. You can do it persona cards, which is more akin to the SharePoint user profiles, but instead of going between pages, you see one person at a time, and you have an up and down button. So up goes to the manager. So from Shai, I can go to Ishai, that's me. And I can flick through the profile to see to see the user. I can click on some links, and all of those can be configured configured in view what it connects to. So you can see in the persona cards, I can configure what are each card actions. So this is for a bit more for developers, but allowing developers to add more actions. So if you have someone who's a keen JavaScripter, you can create your own actions. But Quizcom already included some card actions as part of the product, so you can automatically rely on those, like LinkedIn, follow on Twitter, mention in tweets, Facebook, Instagram, and all of those, the JavaScript is already there. So if you have a keen JavaScripter, they can copy paste that, they can modify that, and they can read the documentation on how to do these advanced customizations. Plus, you have here, it tells you this is a place to read more about how to do these customizations. So for me, as someone who goes to clients and listens to their problems and say, this is what you want, this is how you want it to look and feel, this is fantastic. This allows me to make a lot of changes in how an org chart looks and behaves. What are the options that are shown, and so on. I can click on the hierarchy, and I can see, okay, who's under me. So I can click on that person. Who's the peer for that person? Who's the manager? Who's the staff member? And so on and so on, and I can keep navigating. So that's the persona cards option. You also have the table option, which is a lot more boring. It's more like the SharePoint list. Now, so these are the settings of how to display stuff. Let me go back to where we started, because I want to show you some nice features around that. And our next bit, so after I showed you how to change the org chart, I'm going to show you how to use filters. So you can see here that when I opened this selector, aside from specifying the type of chart, I can also say I want to see I want to display a filter, which adds another row here for filter, which I can configure. It has, I can change its title, give it subtitle, small title, description, what kind of controls. The control is a filter. There's some configuration. Which columns do I want on the filter? So, for example, I want to filter by city. I'm missing it. There we go. So by default, the filter only showed me the search, which allows the user to search. And now I added the city, and if I publish this solution, you can see that the end user, now I'm working as an end user, can search on the org chart, but can also search and limit the search only to city, or open this and say here are the 2 cities that are available, that are actually in there. So I can either type or I can choose, and I say I only want to see the people who are in Canberra, 3 people. I only want to see the people in Toronto. I think that Toronto thing, I misconfigured that. So all except Canberra contains Canberra. Yeah, this I think I misconfigured something in the filter. I'll get back to that. Now the other thing I wanted to show you, aside from the filter, so you can get to pretty advanced filters and let users do filters. Let me switch to conditional formatting, which is the original thing that I wanted to show you. This allows me to add a conditional formatting based on some rules. So by adding a conditional formatting rule, I click Add. Then I can say, okay, I want to set an icon, a color, or or a label. So I can say, oh, let's add this. You can see I have a selection of a lot of pretty amazing icons. Let's add this rainy cloud with color. So that's text color red. You can see it's already changing the color on the chart. So right now it doesn't know what condition I want, so it applies that change to everything. And background color black, yeah, that's what I want. And you can tell it I want to apply it to the entire item or just a certain field in that item. I'm gonna skip that for now. And I'm going to say the condition is only if the city is equal to Canberra, which is where I am. Save and close, and you can see 2 people have the new format, and the other people who are in Toronto do not have that format. Let me zoom out so we can see the entire thing on my small screen. Okay, now I can add another rule, and I'm going to say, well, I'm going to have this a different icon, and notice the icons are not being shown yet because I haven't shown you a view that uses those icons. And I'm going to use a blue text on yellow background, and I'm going to say the condition is city is equal to Toronto. Save and close. And you can see the people in Toronto are now have, well, I only have one person marked in Toronto, now marked in yellow with blue text. So this is a way where a very powerful way that you can actually switch and make it easier for people to see. Now notice here I have the icons, and I can tell. Notice I have the. No, sorry. Was that? I'm thinking of the assistant. I think. No, sorry, that's not the assistant. Yeah, so the label, that's what I was thinking of. So, stuff. So if I add a label for the different formatting, what you get at the bottom, it tells you, the yellow are Toronto stuff, the black are Canberra stuff. Now, the use of icons, I think you can already imagine. I can say, if this person is in the sales department, have this icon. If it's a developer department, have a different icon. And I can do a lot of rules around that. Okay, we are slowly running out of time. So I just showed you conditional formatting. The last, I think that's the last demo. Yeah, it is the last demo. It's connecting to Azure AD. And that will really take a second, and we're right on time for questions and answers. So if I choose, instead of SharePoint List, I choose Graph API, it means that I don't want to connect it to SharePoint List. I want to connect it to an external data source that comes from Microsoft Graph. And for example, you can see here, I can load Graph example. I can say load AD org chart users. I can also load current user profiles or my contact. There's some examples that Quizcom included with the product, and you can come up with your own examples. And I'm going to reset my controls. It automatically connects to my Azure AD. And yeah, it just takes a while. No, I clicked the wrong button there. So once you connect to Azure AD, once the Graph API returns, these are all the columns that Azure AD returns. So it gives me name, department, and so on. I can add column infos. For example, manager ID, manager. And just text. Next. And you can see I connected manager to manager ID. So this is the configuration mapping between the organization chart, what it needs, and Azure, the information that's in Azure. Now, I did run into some lag problems with Azure AD, where it initially tells you there are no people to display. Microsoft takes a bit of time to actually return this information to the graph. Notice here I can click on clear cache, which forces it to get new information. I hope that will work. Otherwise, I have a graph that's already gotten the information from Azure AD. No, okay. So this one will take a while. In my experience, it took a bit of time last time I configured it. But this is the one that I configured earlier. This is how my Active Directory looks. My company's structure that I set up, where we have a CEO, we have several people under the CEO and people under them, and the rest of the configuration is exactly the same, only we are restricted to people who to the configuration in Active Directory. This is how we manage people in Active Directory. We see the people in our domain. We can click on a person and say under job info. Under job info, we can edit and say I want to change the manager for that person, configure a different manager, and save it. And that's something that the IT department is responsible for, because most of the users won't have access to that. So if you want IT department to be responsible for your org chart, that's how they do it. And because of the persistent cache, because of the cache, the change that I've just made will not be shown, no matter how much we refresh the page, until we click that clear cache option, which again takes a longer time and loads the new information. So you can see Craig is no longer positioned under Suzette, and I also I think in a previous change I removed the person I named as his manager. I removed that person from the org chart entirely, or from the organization structure, so that's why they're not displayed. But yeah, with the Graph API, you do need to be patient to see changes, because it takes Azure a bit of time to report that the administrators made a change. But within a few minutes, it only took 5 minutes, and it refreshed. I'm guessing that if I go back to my demo now and refresh this page, it's been 5 minutes, and I think it will show us. But we'll get back to it.